The Gettier problem is a philosophical question about whether a piece of information that happens to be true but that someone believes for invalid reasons, such as a faulty premise, counts as knowledge. It is named after American philosopher Edmund Gettier, who wrote about the problem in a 3-page paper, published in 1963, called Is Justified True Belief Knowledge? The paper refers to the concept of knowledge as justified true belief, credited to Plato, though Plato argued against this very account of knowledge in the Theaetetus. In the paper, Gettier proposed 2 scenarios where the 3 criteria seem to be met, but where the majority of readers would not have felt that the result was knowledge due to the element of luck involved. The term is sometimes used to cover any one of a category of thought experiments in contemporary epistemology that seem to repudiate a definition of knowledge as justified true belief. The responses to Gettier's paper have been numerous. While some rejected Gettier's examples, many sought to adjust the JTB account of knowledge to lessen the impact of both Gettier's own problems and other problems created in their mold. Since 1963, experiments have also been conducted to determine whether the instinctive reactions of those presented with a Gettier problem are uniform or display language or genetic biases. History. The question of what the conditions are that must be met for something to really qualify as knowledge is as old as philosophy itself, and is a constant theme of Plato's dialogues, notably Meno. The more specific problem Gettier raises was also raised by Bertrand Russell in Human Knowledge, Its Scope and Limits. In Russell's stopped clock case, as modified by Israel Scheffler, Alice sees a clock that reads 2 o'clock. She believes it's 2 o'clock, and that is true. However, unknown to Alice, the clock she's looking at stopped 12 hours ago. So, she has an accidentally true, justified belief. Russell provides an answer of his own to the problem. Edmund Gettier's formulation of the problem was important as it coincided with the rise of the sort of philosophical naturalism promoted by W.V.O. Quine and others, and was used as a justification for a shift towards externalist theories of justification. John L. Pollock and Joseph Cruz have stated that the Gettier problem has fundamentally altered the character of contemporary epistemology, and has become a central problem of epistemology since it poses a clear barrier to analyzing knowledge. Alvin Plantinga rejects the historical analysis. According to the inherited law of the epistemological tribe, the JTB, justified true belief, account enjoyed the status of epistemological orthodoxy until 1963, when it was shattered by Edmund Gettier. Of course there is an interesting historical irony here. It isn't easy to find many really explicit statements of a JTB analysis of knowledge prior to Gettier. It is almost as if a distinguished critic created a tradition in the very act of destroying it. Despite this, Plantinga does accept that some philosophers before Gettier have advanced a justified true belief account of knowledge. Specifically C.I. Lewis and A.J. Ayer. Knowledge as justified true belief. The JTB account of knowledge is the claim that knowledge can be conceptually analyzed as justified true belief, which is to say that the meaning of sentences such as, "Smith knows that it rained today," can be given with the following set of necessary and sufficient conditions. A subject S knows that a proposition P is true if and only if P is true, and S believes that P is true, and S is justified in believing that P is true. Gettier's counterexamples. Gettier's paper used counterexamples to argue that there are cases of beliefs that are both true and justified, therefore satisfying all 3 conditions for knowledge on the JTB account, but that do not appear to be genuine cases of knowledge. Gettier, therefore, argued that his counterexamples show that the JTB account of knowledge is false, and thus, that a different conceptual analysis is needed to correctly track what we mean by knowledge. Gettier's case is based on 2 counterexamples to the JTB analysis. Both of them rely on the established claim that justification is preserved by entailment, and the further claim that such applies significantly, or can be applied there coherently to the stipulation attributed to Smith's putative belief. In the case of this particular counterexample, that is, that if Smith is justified in believing P, and Smith realizes that the truth of P entails the truth of Q, then Smith would also be justified in believing Q. Gettier calls these counterexamples Case I and Case II. Case I: suppose that Smith and Jones have applied for a certain job, and suppose that Smith has strong evidence for the following conjunctive proposition. Jones is the man who will get the job, and Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Smith's evidence for might be that the president of the company assured him that Jones would in the end be selected, and that he, Smith, had counted the coins in Jones's pocket 10 minutes ago. Proposition entails, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Let us suppose that Smith sees the entailment from 2, and accepts on the grounds of for which he has strong evidence. In this case, Smith is clearly justified in believing that is true. But imagine, further, that unknown to Smith, he himself, not Jones, will get the job, and, also, unknown to Smith, he himself has 10 coins in his pocket. Proposition is then true, though proposition, from which Smith inferred, is false. In our example, then, all of the following are true, is true, Smith believes that is true, and Smith is justified in believing that is true. But it is equally clear that Smith does not know that is true, for is true in virtue of the number of coins in Smith's pocket, while Smith does not know how many coins are in Smith's pocket, and bases his belief on account of the coins in Jones's pocket, whom he falsely believes to be the man who will get the job. Case 2: Smith, it is claimed by the hidden interlocutor, has a justified belief that Jones owns a Ford. Smith therefore concludes that Jones owns a Ford, or Brown is in Barcelona, even though Smith has no knowledge whatsoever about the location of Brown. In fact, Jones does not own a Ford, but by sheer coincidence, Brown really is in Barcelona. Again, Smith had a belief that was true and justified, but not knowledge. False premises. In both of Gettier's actual examples, the justified true belief came about, if Smith's purported claims are disputable, as the result of entailment from justified false beliefs that Jones will get the job, and that Jones owns a Ford. This led some early responses to Gettier to conclude that the definition of knowledge could be easily adjusted, so that knowledge was justified true belief that does not depend on false premises. More general Gettier-style problems. In a 1966 scenario known as "The Sheep in the Field," Roderick Chisholm asks us to imagine that someone is standing outside a field looking at something that looks like a sheep. They believe there is a sheep in the field, and in fact they are right because there is a sheep behind the hill in the middle of the field. Hence, they have a justified true belief that there is a sheep in the field. But is that belief knowledge? A similar problem which seeks to be more plausible, called the cow in the field, appears in Martin Cohen's book 101 Philosophy Problems, where it is supposed that a farmer checking up on his favorite cow confuses a piece of black and white paper caught up in a distant bush for his cow. However, since the animal actually is in the field, but hidden in a hollow, again, the farmer has a justified true belief which seems nonetheless not to qualify as knowledge. Another scenario by Brian Skyams is the pyromaniac, in which a struck match lights not for the reasons the pyromaniac imagines but because of some unknown Q radiation. A different perspective on the issue is given by Alvin Goldman in the fake barns scenario. In this one, a man is driving in the countryside, and sees what looks exactly like a barn. Accordingly, he thinks that he is seeing a barn. In fact, that is what he is doing. But what he does not know is that the neighborhood generally consists of many fake barns, barn facades designed to look exactly like real barns when viewed from the road. as in the case of a visit in the countryside by Catherine II of Russia, just to please her, since if he had been looking at one of them, he would have been unable to tell the difference. His knowledge that he was looking at a barn would seem to be poorly founded. The no false premises solution, which was proposed early in the discussion, proved to be somewhat problematic, as more general Gettier-style problems were then constructed or contrived in which the justified true belief does not seem to be the result of a chain of reasoning from a justified false belief. For example, after arranging to meet with Mark for help with homework, Luke arrives at the appointed time and place. Walking into Mark's office, Luke clearly sees Mark at his desk. Luke immediately forms the belief, Mark is in the room. He can help me with my logic homework. Luke is justified in his belief. He clearly sees Mark at his desk. In fact, it's not Mark that Luke saw. It was a marvelous hologram, perfect in every respect, giving the appearance of Mark diligently grading papers at his desk. Nevertheless, Mark is in the room. He is crouched under his desk reading Frege. Luke's belief that Mark is in the room is true and justified. Again, it seems as though Luke does not know that Mark is in the room, even though it is claimed he has a justified true belief that Mark is in the room. But it's not nearly so clear that the perceptual belief that Mark is in the room was inferred from any premises at all, let alone any false ones, nor led to significant conclusions on its own. Luke didn't seem to be reasoning about anything. Mark is in the room seems to have been part of what he seemed to see. To save the no false lemmas solution, one must logically say that Luke's inference from sensory data does not count as a justified belief unless he consciously or unconsciously considers the possibilities of deception and self-deception. A justified version of Luke's thought process, by that logic, might go like this. That looks to me like Mark in the room. No factor, right now, could deceive me on this point. Therefore, I can safely ignore that possibility. Mark is in the room. And the second line counts as a false premise. But by the previous argument, this suggests we have fewer justified beliefs than we think we do. In another example, Matthew drives through an area that appears to have many barns. In fact, it contains a great many realistic barn facades, perhaps made to help shoot a Hollywood movie on location. When Matthew looks at the one real barn along his route, he forms the allegedly justified true belief. There's a barn over there, but if he follows the strong requirement for justified belief, then his thought process will follow the previous mentioned steps exactly. A similar process appears in Robert A. Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land as an example of fair witness behavior.